All right. Welcome everyone to the inaugural episode of I don't know what I want to call my podcast. Uh, I am talking with my very good friend Beth Myers today, who is in Nebraska, and it is 11 o'clock or something where you're at. And
10
she's
o'clock.
going to, what was that?
10 o'clock.
10
It's
o'clock.
10 o'clock.
Um, yeah, Beth is a wonderful person. She's a teacher, she's an artist, she skates, she's incredibly funny and caring, and in terms of what you'd want out of a friend, she's about the whole deal. So I'm very lucky to have her as the first guest, and I'm excited to talk really today and just kind of what Beth and I had lined out about art and the value of art and what people take away from art. Um, and a whole bunch of other things. So I'll send it off to you, Beth. Do you have well, how was your day? Did you teach today?
No, it's Saturday, so I
Oh
didn't
shit.
teach.
Duh. Dude, I'm all
But
behind.
this week was my first full week of being a full-time sub, and I'm working in the resource room. So I'm working with SPED students that have behavior issues, or just students that need an extra push to learn how to read or write. And it's such a good experience. It's something that I can add to my resume. And then I'm also taking an art class, which is really cool that we get to do this podcast while I'm taking an intro to exceptional learning class too, so about SPED students. And so it's pretty interesting how things are lining up right now for me.
Yeah. And what's your art class on? Is it specific? Is it
It's called the elements of art. So I believe, if I can remember correctly, the outline of the art class is basically exactly what we're talking about today. Like, what is the value of art and who even values it, the history of art, um, where it even started, different art movements that brought us to where we are today, and like what academia art is and how that has slowly been broken down into art pieces that we see today, where it's just a solid color and
yeah.
then it sells for like millions of dollars. And
That Chloe's in an art history class right now, and um she had to watch this documentary on the commercialization, like the commercial art industry. And I just kind of like poked my head in for a second, and there was this dude named Jeff Koons. Have you ever heard of him?
mm, it sounds familiar. I can't
He's
remember.
he's a sculptor, and he's been around since the late 70s, early 80s, and he's kind of an artist in the same vein, from what I took of it, as like sort of like pop art, kind of like uh cultural cultural criticism, almost, in a way. Like his pieces, he did like a piece, like a robot bunny and he was like a big art installation.
Yes, I know
And
exactly who you're talking about now.
okay, and but I was so surprised because his pieces sell for 3, 4, 5, $6 million. And I was just really curious about why you think um, someone is able to make that. What is it about a piece of art that is able to communicate a value like that? Do you have any kind of immediate
Like a
thoughts?
monetary value.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell because art is like totally based off of your own interpretation. And because as an artist myself, like some things that I think is worth absolutely nothing, someone is like, I'll pay you $50 for it. Like, do you remember that one art show that I had at your house? And there was a print that I did, and it's just something that I made in like one class period, and someone offered me like $500 for it, and I was like, I
Yeah.
thought I was like worth $100. So like, it
Very
totally
cool.
it like totally depends on um how people interpret it. And like, art's just subjective. It and what people put into the value of art totally depends on like the era that it came from,
Hmm.
and like if you're a specific artist. And like in UC Davis, they have at the art program there, they have a big event every year where a bunch of ceramic artists come in, and all the students at Davis too. They just shut down all of downtown UC Davis, or all of Davis, and they just display ceramics everywhere. You can just go into a restaurant and there'll be like 4 ceramic pieces on a pedestal, and
Damn.
it could be a college student or a really famous artist. And there's this one artist that her style is very, very similar. Like every piece that she does has the same face image, and I can't remember her name right now, but her pieces sell for like $20,000 to $50,000, and it was being sold in like UC Davis. So
Yeah.
when you could look at like a student ceramic piece and it look like a similar style, and it would be worth nothing, you know. So it's just interesting. But
Yeah.
I actually have some pictures saved on here of the highest, some of the most expensive pieces that have ever been sold. So this one right here, I'll make it big.
Is that Cy Twombly?
Let's double check here.
For
This
people
is
who are listening, it is a canvas that, I mean, it's chaotic in a cool sort of way. It's not something I'd put in my house, but it's
definitely
it's a canvas, a white canvas splattered with various, just splattered with color. Mostly, I mean, the sort of color that sticks out is the yellow and the red.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much all it is. But I mean, I'm sure the texture is, it looks like a very textural painting just from what you're
Yeah, it definitely wouldn't, since you're right, it is all just paint splatter. It wouldn't just have like a flat dimension feel to it. It would have texture. But even still, like this is I feel like anyone could do this at home, but this artist is actually really famous. His name is Jackson Pollock, and
yeah, I've heard that name.
All of his art looks like this for the most part, and it's a type of abstract art called abstract expressionist. And this piece is titled Number 5, 1943. So all of his pieces are just titled by numbers. And this piece specifically was sold for $140 million.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Okay. And then I have another one here.
To someone who's probably trying to hide some funds that they don't want. Taxes.
Well, so I'm showing you these pieces specifically, and we'll talk about them too, so people who are just listening can kind of conceptualize what we're talking about. But these pieces, like, and anyone that's listening to, you guys can Google like top 10 most expensive art pieces ever sold, and these are all art pieces that are sold at like giant auctions and are just really just passed between like billionaires and people who could actually afford to drop $140 million on a paint splatter canvas. Which
do you think it has real quick before we go to that next painting, how much do you think, for example, when an artist becomes renowned, having a piece of their work essentially is a sign of status? How much do you think a millionaire, or I guess I should say billionaire in these cases, since I mean, well, that last painting was so expensive, but I guess the line between art as a status symbol versus art as something that communicates, I guess, can it do both? Can it communicate this deeper meaning that maybe the artist was looking for the piece to communicate, while also being a more money than like anyone could ever fathom in their entire dreams, you know?
Honestly, I don't think it has anything to do with the art piece in these specific cases. Like, I'll show you this one right now. This piece is by Mark Rothko, and he's the same as Jackson Pollock, where all of his pieces are abstract, and they're all titled by number too. Like this one is what is it? It's titled, like, I think it's also titled Number 5. No, actually this one has a real name. Just kidding. It's white center, yellow pink plus lavender on rose. So that's what this one is titled. And this is a picture of it actually being sold at the auction that it's at. But this one is nicknamed the Rockefeller Rothko because this sold for $73 million in
Holy shit.
2007, I believe. Yeah, 2007.
Right
$73
before the
million.
financial collapse.
Yeah, right.
Anyway.
And so I actually watched a documentary about um what we're talking about right now, and right before the financial collapse there was a lot of art being passed
Do you remember
around
what the documentary was
stuff.
called?
I don't remember what the documentary is called. I can send it to you later. Maybe you can
Okay.
put it in notes or
Yeah.
something. But it's nicknamed the Rockefeller Rothko because this piece was sold at a value like 8 times higher than they were expecting, purely on the fact that the Rockefellers owned it before it was put into auction. And that is the main reason why this piece was sold and was auctioned so high, was because Rockefellers owned it. And that's pure.
Yeah.
It's not because of Rothko, even though he's a famous artist. It's purely because someone with a well-known name owned it before them. And there's this other, going along that too, there's this other piece that Pablo Picasso did, and I don't have a picture of it or remember what it's called, but this piece was in like, there's a casino in Las Vegas that I think is called Picasso. I think it's basically Picasso themed. Like you can go and have dinner there.
Sounds like a
and you're
terrible
gonna
place
have
to
a
trip.
Pablo Picasso. Yeah, let's do shrooms and go to the Picasso Museum.
I'm good. Las Vegas is a kind of a shithole in my eyes.
I would never want to do shrooms in Las Vegas.
No.
I would be way overly stimulated. But anyways,
I'll
this
tell my
piece
Las Vegas story at a different time.
this piece by Pablo Picasso was sold for the millions too. It's on the top 10 most sold paintings. And right, I can't remember if it was before or after it was sold, but the guy who owned it just punched a hole through it.
Probably what I would do if I had that money. Just videotape it as a
It kind of reminds me of the Banksy.
Yeah, the Banksy
story
piece.
where, yeah, where he.
Well, you could say that what he did. So, you should probably jog my memory on this. So Banksy, street artist from England, very well known for these kind of cultural critiques and sort of political statement and fusion with street art and that kind of thing. But the specific thing we're talking about, he had I can't remember, I think it was one of his paintings that was it going to be sold at Christie's or one of the auction houses?
I don't remember, and I don't remember exactly where it was going to be sold, but he made the piece like 15 years before it was even put into auction. I don't know if it was 15 years, but it was definitely a good chunk of time before he knew it was going to be put into auction. And he built a shredder into the frame and watched where this piece went. So when it was sold, he would just shred it instantly, which is like the biggest, like, screw you guys and all of your money.
But at the same time,
makes any sense.
They're gonna. Yeah. What were you saying?
I was just saying it doesn't make sense. Sorry.
I guess it doesn't make sense, and I guess it kind of makes sense as like a way. I mean, it's definitely a statement. I think it's kind of sad because probably what's gonna happen are people are going to feel that what he did was part of the art itself, and someone will buy the blank case that the paper was shredded into or something like that, and still frame it and still buy it for 70 million or whatever. And it's funny too because he's such a non-political, or he's kind of like a very left-wing kind of anarchist type of personality is just kind of conveyed by his art. So it's interesting that the fact that it was even at an auction house, and I mean, the whole story is fascinating. Yeah. And good for him.
Yeah, Banksy's a cool dude. But so this piece, this is a pop art piece.
Yeah.
By Roy Licherson, and he's pretty famous for doing like cartoon styles, like this, like
I
he was
like
in the
this.
same area.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. I really enjoy his stuff. The painting says, so the painting is primary colors, so yellow, red, blue, with black and white. And it's just a woman looking at a man, and they're looking at a painting together. And the woman says, "Why, Brad, darling, this painting is a masterpiece. My, soon you'll have all of New York glamoring for your work," right?
Yeah.
So this piece sold for $165 million. I don't remember who to or when it was, but it's just so
Damn.
this is the second most expensive piece ever sold. The first most expensive piece ever sold was by Leonardo da Vinci, and people don't give Leonardo da Vinci enough credit. He did the Mona Lisa, obviously. Mona Lisa is the most boring painting in the world. I'll talk about that later. But he has the most expensive painting ever sold. So this one right here is just abstract impressionism, just giant blotches of color. The colors are orange, yellow, blue, some teal green on a white canvas. It's an oil painting.
It's like strangely comforting for what it's worth.
Yeah.
And I don't know shit about painting or fine art. I mean, I go to the museum and I enjoy, like, oh, I enjoy that painting. I enjoy this painting. This painting I don't enjoy as much. But yeah, I like
Well,
this.
I mean, that's really what it's all about anyway, is any sort of art that ignites some sort of feeling within, then you've created a masterpiece at that point. Like if you make your audience move with feeling, then it's just like a song. Like if you can make someone feel something with the words and the music that you're creating, then you created something good, right? So I mean, this piece is pretty textural. It'd probably pull you in if you saw it at a museum. It's by William D. Kooning. It's called Interchange, and it sold for $300 million.
Jesus, dude.
So
that's the second most expensive painting ever.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, Leonardo da Vinci, and so his was more than $300 million. I don't remember exactly what it was, but
That makes a little bit more sense to me. I mean, the fact that, I mean, Leonardo is one of he's one of the great masters, he's an OG. You gotta have.
yeah.
Oh, okay. So this is the death of Socrates, or?
Oh, yeah, you totally know this.
Yep, I do know this. English major.
So I just kind of put this up to put on the background while we are continue talking, but tacoing. Man, is that why Socrates died? He did too
Dude,
much
if this
tacoing.
podcast could ever get sponsored by Watermelon
LaCroix. Hey.
who do I need to talk? Who do I need to talk to? I will drink, dude. I'll drink a case I will drink 4 of those a day, easily.
4
Anyway.
LaCroix or 4 cases?
No, not 4 cases. That's too much. 4 LaCroix. 4 LaCroix is pretty easy. But, yeah.
Maybe I should just paint some LaCroix. Do a giant canvas of like LaCroix, kind of like Andy Warhol pop art style.
This is pop art. Look at those pink, green, and red.
Vaporwave, bro.
It is vaporwave. This actually, you know what? One of the reasons I think I like buying LaCroix is because it reminds me of going to the mall when I was a child and drinking out of those. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know.
If anything, you probably have an article of clothing based on that.
I have a face mask actually that is the paper cup, the blue and like the teal and purple paper cup.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, the death of Socrates. This is just, I have a picture, the picture that we started with, which was the birth of Venus, really beautiful painting. And then this one, Death of Socrates. This is a different kind of value of art, right? So
tells a story.
Well, yeah, and this is what you would call like academic art. So, and to be considered academic art, it's the government gave you a stamp of approval. They were like, this is the type of
Something
art
that's important.
that exists, and everything else isn't art, right? So,
Right.
which was really popular in like the Renaissance era and like Roman times, Greek, like most
Antiquity.
European art is considered academic art, right?
Right.
So, and there's a type of like formulaic look to it too. So, every, it's like things are like, if you just think about the Sistine Chapel and like everything that's in the Louvre for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
and like this painting right here, it all has a very similar style to it. And this is what art looked like for a very long time.
Yeah. To me, it's like this type of, so this is the type of art I am most familiar with. And yes, that is possible. Well, not possibly. It's definitely because I was more exposed to this type of art growing up. Um, as I've gotten older, I've definitely gravitated more like towards Eastern styles of art because I think that it's more kind of focused on landscapes and it's minimalist. But anyway, I digress. The Death of Socrates and this type of art in general sort of, to me, it's very connected to a religious ideal of some sort. So the story sort of tells the subtext of what is being painted usually has to do with something that's religious or in this case philosophical, and everything is framed in a way to give the story meaning of some sort. And I guess I do think it's interesting, and I do really appreciate really religious art because the art that you were showing, that like for example the Philip or whoever, Jackson Pollock, sorry,
Yeah.
the Jackson Pollock piece, yeah, it feels very modern because modern, being, modernity is kind of crazy, but it doesn't really call to like a really higher, like you showed me pictures earlier this year of the Vatican, and that blew my mind because all that told me was, and I'm not Catholic, and I think the Catholic Church has done a lot of really fucked up stuff, but I do think there is value in religion to a certain degree, and I think that those pieces of art, as uh, one could say, like grandiose and sort of opulent, over the top and expensive, it's all in created in this vein of this like super high calling, this like religious calling, that I think is very, it's very important, and I think a lot of modern art kind of misses that a little bit.
Or displays it in a different way.
Yep.
Because really, with art like this, it had to have that stamp of approval by the government. Because
Right.
if you were an
Yeah.
artist
Or else
back
you get you get Da Vinci'd.
but if you were an artist during that time, you were commissioned. You weren't just like freely making art as much as you wanted. I mean, you could, but your role as an artist was to create art for the government and
Mhm.
to train other artists. So like Rodin, the guy who did the Thinker, that bronze statue, the
Oh
Thinker.
yes, the thing.
Everyone knows that one, classic, right? His role in society was to make commissions and to be a teacher. All he did was teach other people how to do that specific style of art, so bronze casting, I believe, and just do commissions and stuff. And his art is everlasting, which is really what's incredible about this style of art, is that it's classic. It lasts forever. It will never go away because it's the basis of what art is today.
Right.
And
It
I
is
think
very,
something,
you could say Eurocentric.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But
We,
beautiful
we
too.
could talk about later.
I love the cherubs, the flying cherubs.
Yes, the cherubs, which were really common. This was
Yeah.
cherubs were usually everything had a message too with art like that. You could look at a painting like this and know exactly what it's supposed to mean based off of consistent styles throughout art during that time. Like
Mhm.
cherubs and Cupid often were like this is Venus, right?
Mhm.
Um this is the birth of Venus. And so it often showed like sexuality, intimacy, vanity, love, all of that. So that's what the
And
chair
qualities
showed.
associated at that time too with um and I guess you could say cross culturally to an extent, but like the ideal form of like the female or the
Yes.
ideal form of like the the male.
All women were painted the same way in that time too. Like they were always shaped like this, small breasted, but they were never looking directly into the audience. They were always, their hand was always across their face, or they were looking at Cupid or whatever else, or specifically with a nude woman,
Mhm.
and their hand was either over their breast or like covering themselves in some way. So women were depicted like, I don't really know what word to say, as
Almost like, well, I guess the best way to think about it, how I would think about it, would be how men were depicted and what was the opposite of that, I guess, and juxtapose the two. I look at
well,
paintings like that and I think frigid, like fragile, um,
mhm,
off limits.
yes,
Uh,
because they weren't necessarily sexualized, if that
right.
makes sense. It was more of like a symbol of just women, I guess. I
Yeah,
can't, I know a word for it, but I just can't come
totally. So
up
I
with
know,
it.
yeah, I hear what you're saying.
So okay, I'll kind of like walk you through the movements of art
Please do.
history, right?
Please do. Because
So
I
we just went.
this is a master class, a quick podcast master class.
Okay, so
Let's do it.
we just went through academic art. So
Mhm.
with academic art, you're looking mostly at like neoclassicism and
Could you
classic
hold that thought for one
Renaissance art.
second? I'm gonna grab another LaCroix.
Gotta
Pull
have a
up.
LaCroix for this stuff, you know?
Dude, I know. I got to. Here, pull it
Maybe
up.
Lagunitas can sponsor us.
Oh, yeah. A little something. BRB, 30 seconds. All right, son. All right, throw it up. So what are we starting with?
Okay, so we started with classism,
Hmm.
or classicalism, neoclassicalism, and Renaissance art, right?
Yeah.
And then so it slowly digressed. I don't necessarily remember what the jump from Renaissance art to Impressionist art, right? We're just gonna pretend that was all um, just a big
I
jump.
know the
We're gonna,
Enlightenment happened
yeah,
between those times. So maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know.
but it pretty much all looked the same, right? Like
Right.
even if we look at Impressionism,
Maybe it's
which
just like one is a little less boring. I don't know.
yeah, this is technically modern art because this is a
Right.
Monet. Monet is This is Water Lilies by Monet. This is probably one of his most famous paintings. And Monet is a beautiful painter. Like
Yeah.
it's hard to really capture his beauty
Right.
on a screen, but if you see this in real life, it's way more, the colors are just, they grab you more, and they really just pull you into the painting. He's
And
a
a
great
lot of these
painter.
paintings too are large. When you're in a
Yes.
room with one of these paintings, even going to the Crocker in Sacramento, which I am going to tell everyone who ends up listening to this to please go down to the Crocker and support the Crocker because they've got some wonderful art in there. And um, yeah, it's amazing standing in front of these paintings and seeing what every brush stroke looks like in person. You can't recreate it digitally.
Yes. Also, the Crocker Art Museum is hands down one of my favorite art museums I've ever been to, and I've been to a lot of museums. So Crocker Art is just great. So I fully support that. Um, this is Impressionism, right? So this other impressionist paintings or painters are Rembrandt, Monet. Yeah.
Those are the big ones.
Van Gogh, you could consider him, but he was mostly a post-impressionist. So
Mhm.
the reason why I'm talking about impressionism and post-impressionist impressionism is because post-impressionism really was the big jump of changing the way art looked, in my opinion, because let's do a side-by-side comparison of these
Wow.
two paintings. Okay,
Yeah.
so here we go. Ooh, I don't know what just happened there. Beep boop bop beep.
Beep boop bop.
Okay,
We'll just have
so
to have the mask on. Or
all
there
right,
we
here we go. So this painting right here is, you would consider realism. Realism. So this is a beautiful painting of what is his name? It's someone specific. One second.
Yeah, the one on
Sorry.
the left is they're both gorgeous, but in completely different ways.
Oh yeah. So okay, this one on the left is titled Bashi Bazouk.
Mhm.
I'm probably not saying that correctly. It was made in 1868. It's a French painting. It's done by a French person. I'm not going to say his name because I know I'm going to say it wrong. But it's
Please
a
say
beautiful painting.
it.
I'll try. I'm going to say Jean-Leon Jerome.
Jean-Leon Jerome
um
in the
okay, and then
building.
the one and then the one on the right, so these are, to those who are listening, both the pictures that we are comparing right now are both portraits. So the one on the left by the French, by Jean-G Jerome,
Hell yeah.
I'll say that, is a realism painting. So it looks like a photograph. Every detail in it looks like, you can even see the highlights on his sweater, to the point where you know exactly where the light is coming from. It's beautiful. It
Yeah.
looks like a
And it's
photograph.
is it a French? It looks like an African tribal, like a traditional tribal
Yeah.
um man. I mean, I don't know where from, maybe like northern Morocco or something. But
It was
who knows?
painted
I
in
don't
1868, so I'm imagining that this was during the time where the French were colonizing, and they probably did a portrait of
someone in the
someone
territory that they'd
in
colonized.
the territory that they were trying to colonize. Yeah. Regardless, it's beautiful. It's beautiful painting. Um, the one on the right is the guy who did this, his name is Paul Cézanne. Cézanne. I'm gonna say that wrong. And it sucks that I'm saying that wrong, because he is considered the father of post-impressionism, right?
Mhm.
Um, this is a portrait of his wife, and it's his wife's name in a red dress, and um he started painting in 1888 and he finished it in 1890. So around the same, only like a 20-year difference here,
Yeah.
right? And you can kind of see here how art is starting to be broken down.
Right.
Like this post-impressionist painting, you can see he's experimenting with color more. The color on his wife's skin, you can see the pink and the blue and the green hues that you would normally all mix together to create a solid skin tone color. And it has the painting on the left, where it's depicting realism, it has depth to it. You can
Mhm.
see
It
the
does look like
features
a
are more
picture.
defined. It looks three-dimensional, and the one on the right is, it doesn't have any depth to it. It looks flat. And so you can just see here
I,
how art is starting to break down in the
both are
experimentation
very both are very powerful to me in different ways, but I think the one on the right the post-impressionist painting of his wife, because he's using because he's not trying to recreate something
Mhm.
you know, verbatim, or what it actually is. Like the one on the left is clearly this someone posed for a portrait, and this whoever um, painted it and add like a representation of that. But the post-impressionist painting, because of the mixture of the blue and the different hues, it gives the painting a different, it makes me feel like his wife, it's a very kind of almost melancholy feeling
Mhm.
because of those added elements to it that make it differ from reality in
Mhm.
that way.
And I believe these are also both French paintings that are done within 20 years of each other. So it's pretty incredible the different messages that you can get and the vast difference in style here too. It's it's pretty crazy. So then you go from that to then we go to modern art, you know? And modern art, this painting is really beautiful too. I love
Yeah.
this one. This painting is by I don't remember, but it's untitled and it's depicting a black man as a police officer on a police car. And I just find he looks strong, and I just think it's a beautiful painting, and you can just see the texture of it, and it's a great painting.
Yeah,
I need to
there's
tell you.
there's like this space behind him that almost could resemble street lights or
Yeah.
something, but it's abstract enough that it just kind of feels like this it feels very futuristic and like very hyper real. Like I remember it, I heard someone describe art like this to me once, and it made a lot of sense, where art is visual art specifically depicts something and visualizes something that is more real than reality. So like he was talking about Van Gogh in this case, and I love Van Gogh. I have actually right in front of me um, a street cafe in Paris, that
Ooh,
painting.
I love
It,
that one. That one's so
yeah.
good.
And what it does to me, it's like obviously it's not a photorealistic representation of a night cafe in Paris, but the painting captures both the visual representation and the mood of what that is. And that to me is hearing that said, that visual art and art in general captures the hyper reality of things, really stood out to me, and it made me go, oh yeah, holy shit, that is what it does.
Mhm.
This painting right here does that to me too,
Yeah. And it's
especially.
interesting. I actually just noticed that these background lights are street lights. So he's almost sitting in like a parking lot or something.
Yeah, it's
It's
very
pretty
neat.
cool. It's by Carrie James Marshall, and it was done in 2015. So it's a pretty new painting.
Pretty new.
But then also, if this one, I think you're gonna get a kick out of this one.
Oh wow, that looks like some people's art I
It's
see on Instagram.
so it's just a blue background of just white sketched drawn squares, and it's by Richard Alcrick. It's titled Art and Language Number 2, and it was done in 2014. So
How much
and
did that one sell
you
for?
asked me, huh?
Do you know did this piece get sold?
No, it's at the MoMA. So
Oh, okay, in San Francisco.
yeah, so and most of the time when art pieces are at the at a museum, they're not sold to the museum, they're like borrowed or lended to,
Gotcha.
um which is interesting in itself. But you just mentioned Van Gogh and that painting of him in the cafe, or not him in the cafe, but it's called like a night in Paris or something like that. Is it red and green? Does it have red and green in it with some
Um,
yellow?
it's got a lot of yellow and blue, and the yeah, a lot of orange too. I mean, I'm looking at it sort of in this little bit of light that I have. My favorite thing about Van Gogh is how he paints stars, which is how when I look up at night in the sky and there's a lot of stars out, it's overwhelming, just the vast number of them, you know. But Van Gogh just does these big splotchy stars that take up the whole sky, and
Yeah.
it's very kind of yeah, it's a very beautiful way of painting the night.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because he felt the same way. He if you should look up the letters that he wrote to his brother, because that really told his life story and how he felt about things. And a lot of, even with those letters, a lot of Van Gogh's life was kind of a mystery
Mhm.
and
Very tragic.
very tragic. And but he felt the same way about the sky, and he has a couple quotes in those letters about exactly what you just said, of how entranced he was by the night sky and how it spoke to him. So you
Yeah,
can
I'll
see
check that
that
out.
yeah, it's pretty awesome. But that, I was asking what colors it was,
Hmm.
or what colors it, yeah, what color it was, because he did this one painting that it's of a cafe somewhere, and it's red and green. It's not just red and green, but those are the two main colors in it. And he did that specifically because he hated those colors. And because
I can tell because I know so much of his other work is those same sort
mm-hmm,
of blues and oranges and yellows and
yeah. Well, he hated those colors together, and he found it really funny that that was the color that Americans used for Christmas, because he just hated that color combo. And but pretty funny.
yeah.
Speaking of Van Gogh Starry Night, I'll show you this one. This is a
Ooh, that's cool.
ooh, it's, guess what it is? You'll never guess. You'll seriously never guess.
I'm okay. I'm gonna choose the most ridiculous thing that just popped into my head. It is it's a close up of someone's armpit.
Okay,
No?
kind of.
Great.
This was actually created in a lab at the California Institute of Technology, and it is DNA strands folded in half over and over and over and over again to recreate Van Gogh's Starry Night. And this image, this painting, well, you can't even call it painting, this work is the size of a quarter.
Holy
So
shit.
yeah, pretty cool.
That is incredible.
Really crazy. I know, I didn't even know that you could like fold DNA strands in half, but
Leave it to the geniuses at Caltech.
okay, so before we talk about futurism, which I think you're gonna really enjoy, and
I
it's gonna be really
I will
cool.
say right now I love futurism.
Okay, so you already know what it is. Cool, cool.
Yeah, actually, so I do follow a lot of artists on Instagram, um, who I guess you could sort of categorize as futurist artists or like kind of the cyberpunk artists or anything like that. I'd love that kind of dystopian future vision. Um, well, first of all, because I think we're sort of headed there, but that's a whole different that's a whole different topic.
um, I'm gonna take you back to the very, like, the oldest
Take me back.
creation ever to exist
Take
that
me
we
back
know of.
30
The
million years.
oldest, yeah.
Well, not that long, but yeah, take me back to the first art.
Okay, so this is called the Shabu Cave. I'm probably saying that wrong. I'm not
French
good
again?
at pronouncing things. I know I'm going to be a teacher, but you know what? We're all working on it.
No, give me the
I
quality
can't
attention
remember.
to iPad. You're good.
Yeah, I'll just give everyone their iPad and they'll learn that way, right? That's
This
how.
is amazing. Old Neolithic art. I mean, I'm just saying that word like I understand this is from the Neolithic period. Um,
It's actually
this,
from the Paleolithic period.
damn it,
That's how you say it.
this is incredible
So
to me.
yeah, so you can look this up. It's called the Shavet Cave, maybe
It sounds
Chavuect.
French again. This is this in France?
No, it was named by the person who discovered it in 1994. So this cave was discovered in 1994,
Wow.
and these are carbon dated back to 30,000 BCE.
Jeez.
So super old. This is the oldest creation we know of. So we're looking at um a they use like charcoal and things like that. They like burn the ends of sticks and they like charcoaled into the sides of caves. And this is what it looks like in the actual cave. It's not only is it the oldest piece, like oldest creation ever known that we know of currently, blah blah blah. It's in great condition. They actually have this cave sealed off to the public. Nobody can enter it. It's like sealed off with a steel wall and everything. So it's
Well,
not.
even people taking pictures of it would ruin it after time.
Yeah. There's this cave somewhere else that was, I can't remember where it is, but they opened it up to the public and it's completely destroyed now, not from people actually destroying it, but just from people being there and breathing. It's created a mold in the cave and completely destroyed all of the drawings on the cave. So this is really cool. But I think this is so much cooler, and the picture won't truly show.
Whoa, dude.
And
I
this is,
know about Gobekli Tepe
yeah,
to a little bit.
it's
That's
crazy.
the first human. So this is the oldest recorded archaeological, I guess you could say, um, permanent human settlement that has been. Am I correct?
Yes, this is in Turkey,
Mm-hmm.
and from the Neolithic period. So this is older than Stonehenge, and this is where this is found in like the Fertile Crescent. This is where people started growing food, learning how to farm, really creating
Mesopotamia.
civilizations. So then really you jump,
Modern day Iraq and southern Turkey for people who don't know.
and it's interesting because when the first time it was ever discovered, it was totally dismissed. Like archaeologists were like, there's nothing here. And then 5 years later, archaeologists went back and was like, this is absolutely insane. Like all of these sculptures that we're looking at were created before Stonehenge was. Like,
Wow.
so and this is like right after the Ice Age too, where like farming communities really started happening and people started living closer together and like, yeah, the whole Fertile Crescent dealio, how humans actually started, the farming revolution.
Right.
And but the way that this is set up is it's rings, so it's like it's like a circle in the middle and then it just goes out in rings, and they're still finding stuff. Like it's still under excavation, they're still looking for things. It's pretty incredible.
That's amazing.
But okay, now that we've gone way back and we've kind of talked about the
Yes,
basics,
yes.
we can jump from post-impressionism to modern art. And you also asked me, what is modern art? And I looked at that question and I was like, woof, because there isn't really a clear definition of modern art because it's
No
such a
clear
wide.
definition for the modern world.
Yeah. Well, modern, if you just say modern art,
Mm-hmm.
modern art is a really widespread timeline, right? Modern art allegedly starts at 1860. So 1860 was who I just showed you, like
Right.
Monet, and which his art you could still kind of consider has that stamp of approval by the government. You know, it has that simple look to it, or I would actually, let me take that back, not simple look. It has that same style, you know.
I know of so as a writer and English nerd, um, the distinction between modern and postmodern. I don't know. Tell me if this is somewhat correct. I know in terms of literature, the distinction between modern and postmodern, again, kind of runs along those lines of like 1860-ish to like up to the end of World War II, and really in like modern poetry, like Ezra Pound is a great example. Like just this kind of focus on the objective world. You know, you have this movement called like objectivism, which seeks to understand the world in like sparser language as it is. Um, it's much more idealistic and focused on just the sort of um, like it's very kind of high-minded. You know, this is a lot of it took place before and sort of during like these huge cataclysmic events of World War I and World War II, where millions and millions of people died. And I know that in the aftermath of modern literature, you get postmodern literature, which is very um, the focus is much more it's much more about deconstructing the reality imposed or set up as they saw by modern art. So modern art was making a statement about the world. That statement was more or less kind of factually incorrect. And postmodern art is about deconstructing that and basically kind of relying on the construction, and the construction meaning just the sort of general idea and theme of whatever it is the artist wants to create.
That is really interesting because it lines up perfectly, because modern art would be considered from 1860 to 1870, so around the time that
So maybe
you're
there's some
the
maybe
timeline just lined up.
the artists held out a little bit longer than the literature
Yeah.
than the writers, I guess.
I mean, some people would even say that modern art is considered to today too, but I think that's too big. It's too
Right.
wide of a category,
And who
because
defines, so like I know we're about to get into modern art, but really quick, what is so I know a lot of things are defined essentially by like the intelligentsia. Like if someone says this is a new kind of idea and a new sort of this is a new group of people who are making and creating this certain way and it takes a name, then that is the name. You know, it's like there's a new type of rap music, it's going to be called this. There's a new type of art, it's going to be called this. Who is it critics, is it museums, is it the artists themselves, is it like who kind of
that's a
sets
great
up?
question. I have no idea.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's kind of like who determines what, like, if a word is real or not. You know, who's the board of committee, like who's the
yeah,
committee out there in the world that says YOLO is allowed to be in the dictionary or not.
true
Like
that shit.
I don't really
That's true.
know where
It's a
these terms.
subjective objective argument.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's an answer, but like I'm sure that the word surrealism came from somewhere, and it may have been Dali himself, but it could have not been, you know.
right.
So there's a lot, just like with every other movement of art, there's like sub movements of art. So
Totally.
within modern art, you have pop art, surrealism, impressionism, cubism, art deco, minimalism, data, futurism. And we can go ahead and start with futurism, because
Let's
I
do
feel like
futurism.
futurism is pretty cool. So the god of the father of futurism
Look at this.
was,
Look at this guy.
do you know who this guy is?
No, he reminds me of like a. This is how I imagine like hipster barista dudes are gonna look in 20 years.
Yes. And no, that's how they look now.
Well, that's how they
Totally.
look
With
now, but
the mustache.
when they don't have any hair and their mustache is a little bit more
You can't tell me that have you never seen a like a hipster barista with like a shaved head and a little
oh
tiny.
dude, I've seen, yeah, I've
Oh,
seen that.
yeah,
They look kind
this
of
is
like
totally what they look like.
it's the like old English bare knuckle boxer look, but
Yes.
without any of the um without any of the testosterone. That's a judgment.
So this hipster barista man
Yeah.
is Filippo Marinetti, and he is Italian. And in Italy, he's like the father of futurism. Like this man straight up wrote a manifesto called the Manifesto of Futurist Painters. And he unfortunately was also a fascist, and
Italian
what's the most
fascist. Yeah.
yeah. And so the whole idea of futurism in the art world was, it was based off of destroying the future, or destroying the past and like going for the future.
Mhm.
It glorified modern times. It aimed to liberate
A lot like
Italy
modernism.
from the weight of the past.
Yeah.
um it focused on speed and technology and automobiles and the
And
youth.
technology and industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The industrial city, you can see all of these things are really common within art. So
Does that sort of correlate with like Art Deco type stuff? Like the sort of like Metropolis, this kind of like Art Deco-y, like super sort of like um almost like this vision of a city as sort of a holy place almost, just like super like I don't know if that's making any sense, but like if you ever look at old movie posters from like the 20s or 30s, they have this very like kind of futuristic uh
Mhm.
representation of like the metro area or like urban area.
Whenever I think of Art Deco, I always think of the cover of Great Gatsby, and I think
Definitely.
of I think of Great Gatsby a lot. And I guess you could say it's kind of the same, but I
A little bit
feel
different.
like futurism was more intense. Like it had some like fascist motives behind it. Like I have some quotes from his manifesto if you wanna
Yeah,
listen.
let's dig into a
Um
fascist manifesto.
um with our enthusiastic adherence to futurism, we will destroy the cult of the past, the obsession with the ancients, and the academic formalism, totally invalidate all kinds of imitation, evalu- eval- elevate all attempts of originality, however daring, however violent. Bear bravely and proudly the smear of madness which with they will try to gag all innovators. Regard art critics as useless and dangerous.
We agree there.
Rebel against
I'm
the
just kidding.
tyranny of words, harmony, and good taste, and other loose expressions which can be used to destroy the works of Rembrandt, Rodin, and Goya. Sweep the whole field of art clean of all themes and subjects which have been used in the past. Support and glory in our day-to-day world, a world which is going to be continually and splendidly transformed by victorious science. The dead shall be buried in the earth's deepest bowels.
Yeah,
So that's
that's
him
a little
talking
intense.
about art. you know,
Yeah.
that's which is it's pretty intense. So like I think Art Deco kind of had like the same idea of like future, hell yeah, brother. Let's
Right.
drive a car and drink a bunch of wine and not wear seatbelts. Woo!
Yeah,
Not really,
exactly.
but you know what I mean.
Totally.
But this had a
Well,
whole other level to it.
yeah.
And the irony of futurism is that a lot of these painters were fascists, and they all went to war, and they most of them died in war. And the irony for me behind that is that the future that they were fighting for died with
Killed
them,
them. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
um so pretty interesting. I mean, obviously that guy
Yeah, that
is
was
a
very
terrible
cool.
guy, but he started a whole movement. Like futurism was a huge movement, and
And in the
from
context
there,
of time too, it's like
yeah.
obviously fascism's terrible. We don't want to go back to it, and there's no
Mhm.
real excusing it. But to understand it, looking at the way technology was transforming the world coming out of the Industrial Revolution, and
Mhm.
you know, prior prior to World War One and between World War One and World War Two, uh, this was essentially a giant experiment on both the far right and the far left, because these things didn't exist in a vacuum. The Soviet Union they were coming to power at this time too, and people were genuinely unsure about the best method of um, creating a country and creating a nation, and they didn't understand that giving totalitarian control to one person is, there's a lot of idealism in that
Yeah.
manifesto, a lot of idealism, dangerous idealism.
Yeah. Like the dead shall be buried in the earth's deepest
What
bowels.
does that mean, dude? That's just,
Talking
that
about
is just
painting.
that's emo.
Hella emo, bro. He was listening to My Chemical Romance every time he painted.
My chemical warfare.
um, okay, so from futurism, then you have pop art, surrealism. So I'll pull up one of my most favorite paintings of
Oh, this is
all time.
Picasso.
Who is it?
This is Picasso, right?
Hell no, bro. It's
No, I thought it
Dali.
was. I thought it was Picasso.
No, Picasso doesn't do anything like this.
Oh no, I
Picasso,
did this guy do the melting clock?
yes.
Okay, I get him confused.
Yeah,
Who's it again?
Salvador Dali.
Dali, that's right. Duh.
He's the one that has like the mustache up to his eyebrows, right?
Yes, yes.
Crazy
I picked
dude.
Dali. That's what I meant. This is
Crazy
very
dude.
cool.
I actually have seen this painting in person. It's in the Vatican.
Hmm.
It's not very big. But it's beautiful. This piece is titled "Soft Angel in a Soft Monster in an Angelic Landscape."
Mm.
So this big lumpy kind of looks like, reminds me of a whoopee cushion or a kidney is on, like, kind of reminds me of what he's kind of depicting here is like a sacrifice, like
Yeah.
I think of, what's the one biblical story of the son or the father trying to kill his son for a sacrifice to God. That's is it Abraham and,
Oh my God.
oh my God, I know
Cain and
that.
Abel is the brothers.
Yeah, and that wasn't a sacrifice, that was straight up murder,
Yeah,
bruh.
that was murder. This is
It was, I
terrible.
believe it was Abraham
And
and,
Isaac,
yeah,
I
something
think.
like that. There's a beautiful painting in Crocker Art Museum actually depicting that moment. Um, and it's pretty scary because the sheep are in that painting, the sheep are like hiding behind the bushes with really wide eyes, and it's a pretty interesting painting. But this whoopee cushion soft monster thing reminds me of that biblical story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but it's sacrificed, it's wounded, it's cut, it's has a tip cut and off, it's limp, showing that it's dead. And then these angelic looking things in the back all look like they're rejoicing, like the sacrifice actually happened. And this is purely just my interpretation of the painting, right?
Right.
I've never looked up what this painting actually means, or if even if he put out what it actually means, but it
Clearly
really,
some juxtaposition between
yeah,
the whatever this pedestal is and the thing that's on it. To me, that looks like a stomach, and the angelic creatures. I mean, just the fact that he's placing those two things next to each other means that, in my eyes, that he's making. I definitely relate to that, to what you said about sacrifice, and yeah, that's very interesting. I could look at this for a long time.
yeah. And it's, what makes this painting really incredible too is the foreshortening. And foreshortening is something you really have to really figure out as an artist, and it's really hard. And foreshortening is when you take a 3D or a 2D image and then you like elongate it to where it actually has depth to it. So if I was drawing someone laying down, I would have to elongate their body on a two-dimensional surface to actually give that image depth.
Right.
And like if you take all of these figures away here and maybe just leave this, well, no, even take the little kidney whoopee cushion stomach looking thing out,
It has no depth to
and
it.
all the figures out of here, and you just left the color, then it would just be a two-dimensional surface. But because he added these things and gave them depth, like this looks huge compared, angelic thing in the way back looks huge compared to these. And it's a beautiful painting. So this is surrealism. I could talk about Dali forever. His
Yeah.
art really, the two artists that has inspired me the most to be an artist has been Dali and Picasso. Both terrible human beings, but
Both
really
Spanish
great
too,
art.
right?
Huh?
Both Spanish too, right?
Um,
I know Picasso. I'm pretty sure Picasso is Spanish. I also think Picasso might have been involved in, I can't remember. I definitely know he was involved in the Spanish Civil War in some way.
he was, and he actually became a communist at like the age 68 or something like that, like old.
Interesting.
But I don't believe he was from Spain. He spent most, I can't remember. He spent almost all of his life in Spain for sure. But I can't remember whether he was born there or not. And Picasso's a great artist because he really defined what it was to change art, because if you look at his older stuff,
Oh yeah,
he was a prodigy. He was a great
I've seen some
artist.
of it, some of his
He
sketches.
he he was what you would call an academic artist at the very beginning of his artist
He
career.
studied that path.
Yeah, and then he was just like, fuck this. I'm
His
gonna do
painting, his
whatever the
painting
hell I
that he
want.
did, um, I don't think it's not the Scream. I think I'm getting Dali confused again, but it's essentially it's the giant painting. It's very long and it depicts war, and
Yeah, that is called, I'll tell you really quick. That painting actually was very controversial and it was huge, and it actually depicted a specific moment in war when, here it is. It's called Guernica.
Veronica.
Veronica, yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so where he was, or somewhere where he was in Spain, was bombed, and he was so torn by this that he painted it. And I wish I could show you. I don't have I actually thought about showing this one. I have it in my textbook and I'm looking at it right now, but it was 25 feet long and it was just black and white. And he actually, the government wouldn't let him show it. It was like so controversial. But it was Cubism too, which Cubism alone at that time, because academic art was still pretty popular in that moment. Like critics were, they were way more intense than they are now. Like I feel like there aren't real art critics now. You can kind of make whatever you want and just be an artist and be who you are, and no one will really judge what your art is. But back then, like, your art still had to look a certain way for it to be considered art, and this was Cubism. And what we're looking at right here too is also Cubism. So Picasso is the father of Cubism, and Dali is like the father of surrealism.
Yeah.
And but that the painting that we are talking about, Guernica, really crazy. It's really
So
cool.
what is Cubism? I mean, I noticed just by looking at this painting, it's almost it's a kind of boxy, but in like a really interesting way. Like, how would you define Cubism,
Mm,
or at least,
if I were to put it into my own terms, because I don't know the actual real definition, I would say boxy with a little mix of abstract. You can definitely like still point out figures and see what they're looking at, but also a huge thing of Cubism too is um, looking at one thing from different perspectives. So if you look
gotcha.
at this painting, this is called this is a pop. This is like the first Cubism painting that Picasso put out, and it was also once again insanely controversial. Like everyone was like, "What are you doing?
Yeah.
That's not art. Who told you you could do stuff like that?" So this painting is actually, I believe it's French. It's titled French, but I'm going to say it in English. It's Ladies of Argonne. It was made in 1907. And if you look at this painting, this figure right here, so the second figure from the left, looks like she's laying down, when everyone else
Right.
is standing up, and she's like
Interesting.
almost laying down on a bed. And one of the reasons why this painting was so controversial is because this is depicting a brothel, um, which Pablo Picasso frequent brothels,
Yeah.
and so and sexuality like in 1907 was still something
Much
that wasn't
different.
really talked about, you know.
Right. Well, and this woman too, I noticed at the bottom of the painting, the woman on the left, her foot, the color on her foot is almost turned like you could again from this perspective thing you're saying, you could almost see her laying down next to them or standing because of the way the light is hitting the top of
Yeah.
her foot and not the bottom in the middle.
Hmm.
That's very neat.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And so we talked earlier with like Renaissance paintings and classic paintings of how women never looked at their audience. They're always looking at something else, or their face was covered, like in the Birth of Venus, her hand was like over her face, right?
Hmm.
Another reason why this was so controversial is because these women are looking directly at the viewer
Yeah.
and depicting a brothel. It was like it kind of evokes an emotion of like you're walking into this room, or you're stepping into their time, you know. This is
Yeah.
their time, their place. When looking at the Birth of Venus, you're admiring this woman, and it's a different feeling, you know.
Their eyes
uh,
are definitely telling you something too. I mean,
yeah,
just the fact that they're staring right at you, it's there's almost a natural discomfort that's sort of evoked, you know?
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
um so then we'll kind of I'll go over a couple more paintings.
Yeah.
um
I have a few questions about how you think we can do this. I'll ask those after the after you show these, but I'm curious just so you kind of know where I want to go. It's like about the way that the internet and Instagram and all of social media. So just prime that, put it in your chamber to think about when we go over.
I'm already I have a way of getting there. I'm already
Okay.
on the way.
Okay. I'm in.
Okay.
Okay.
So, because we're slowly getting there, right?
Yeah, we're getting
We're kind of
to
like at the early 1900s. So
mhm.
then we look at minimalism. I'll go over this one really quick. This is a famous painter named Piet Mondrian, I believe. I'm probably saying his name wrong, but he was a minimalist painter. Um, and it looks, honestly, the lines are so straight. It's crazy. This is all done by hand. This is an oil painting.
Hmm.
So this painting, for people who are listening, is called Broadway Boogie Woogie.
Oh.
And it's just simple straight lines of yellow, blue, and red, primary colors. So anytime you look at something that's primary colors, it's automatically going to grab your attention because
Yes.
those are all across from each other on the color wheel. So scientifically, your eyes are already brought to it. And all three of these colors can make up every other color of the rainbow.
Mhm.
So these three colors will always catch an eye, even by themselves. Red will always catch your eye, blue will always catch your eye, and yellow will always catch your
Makes me
eye.
think of
So
immediately think of fast food. It's always
yeah,
either yellow or red.
ding ding ding. That is
Psychology.
exactly, yeah. Graphic designers often use these colors, especially when creating logos, because your eye will always catch to those. Um, so he was whatever about him. He was pretty simple living,
Interesting.
minimalist painting, right? So then we'll fall into I don't really know how they pronounce this. Data, data, data. I don't
Nada.
know. Da, that's what it's called, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Is that a painting or a sculpture?
so this one is a sculpture, and then this one is a recreation of the Mona Lisa, which will then bring me into um, today's art
Yeah.
and how much I hate the Mona Lisa. Okay.
Okay.
So both of these we're looking at on our left here, a recreation of the Mona Lisa. It's titled LHOOQ. And then on the right, we have a urinal. And on the bottom left of the urinal says Armut 1917. The person who created both of these, so these are both by the same artist, is not named Armut. His name is Marcel Duchamp, and he really created the whole movement of just recreating art, right?
Right.
Because how many times have you seen the Mona Lisa recreated? How many times have you seen Starry Night recreated? I already showed you a version of Starry Night earlier
Yeah.
in this talk.
Reminds me
So
of like Andy Warhol too, and his sort of connections to that. Like,
so you're totally in my brain right now. I was just gonna talk about Andy Warhol next because Andy Warhol has been sued 3 times throughout his artistic career for plagiarism.
I would have expected more, honestly.
I would have expected more too, but
Yeah.
I believe that number is, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I personally don't like Andy Warhol. I don't think he's
Not
a
a
good
huge.
artist. I I think the art that he has created has really took a minimal amount of effort.
He's like the
I'm
original
not a big
influencer.
He's what?
He's like the original influencer. He
Yeah,
was cool.
totally. And he
Yeah.
had that look to him. He had the style.
He had the chicks.
He Yeah, whatever. And honestly, I don't know how he had the chicks because he's not a good looking man. But regardless, this guy, uh, Marcel, this Mona Lisa painting, all he did was put a mustache on her. That was it. He
Oh,
just really
that's
took the
crazy.
whole painting and put a mustache and a goatee, and bam, it's art, right? What he did on the right was take a ceramic urinal and write R Mutt 1917 on it.
Okay,
Bam,
so
it's
these
art.
types of people piss me the fuck off
I agree.
because there's no talent to that.
No.
It's there's just no talent to that. Talent is
Okay.
something that okay, I'll get off my soapbox because we're gonna go
No,
into this in a
no,
minute.
tell me about it because I totally agree. It's
Okay, in
annoying.
order to create art, and this is why I take a lot, this is why I mean, as a musician and writer, I do, you know, I think I have some sort of understanding of what aesthetic art or, you know, what is I guess what's the word? What makes you think. And it takes a certain type of talent to create something that makes you think. And talent meaning inherent and developed ability, practice, something that you I know that we're kind of nowadays the idea of like meritocracy seems less and less popular, but there are incredibly talented people who have developed their craft making beautiful things.
Mhm.
Someone putting something on a piece of paper that's a line or 2 lines or drawing a box and calling it art because it speaks to some weird feeling inside of us that is completely subjective that will come and go with the next person in line to look at it is not art. You have to have some sort of, just like you can't go to a concert and someone is going to you know if someone you paid to go to a show and someone walked on stage and just started farting into the microphone, you wouldn't say that that's music.
Who's to say that it isn't,
Well,
though?
true, because there's this Japanese dude who is he sells out tours around the world, and all he does is go fucking spastic on a snare drum and beat the shit out of a snare drum, and all these people stand back and they cross their arms, and you know, in my opinion, it connects to this idea of what is sort of new and cool and edgy. And yeah, this dude's just beating his snare drum with his head, but it doesn't sound good. So, you know, but here we are at this exclusive show watching something that no one else can see, and it's all of a sudden cool. And yeah, I'll get off my soapbox, but that's just sort of my rant about you can have a tiny bit of talent and still make great art. But
Mhm.
those people are rare, you know? There are musicians who are not very talented and yet they can write something poetic and beautiful, and or they can get in a room with people who actually know what they're doing on their instruments, and they can create something. But art gets away with it more than a lot of other professions do
I
because
I I totally agree with you, especially in the world that we live in now.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to protect yourself as an artist. Like, because it's like with music, if you create a song and someone samples your song, you can figure it out way more, and you can somehow you can prove it better too. But like Andy Warhol ripped people off all the time, and he was only sued 3 times for it, and also I believe the case that I'm going to show you right now was the only one that actually he had to give this woman credit for, right? So we're looking at on the screen right now a Andy Warhol screen print, which he was a screen printer, which also for reference of screen printing, you basically print out an image on a screen and then you print it, and you can print it over and over and over and over and create a bunch of images of the same exact thing, right? And you could get something off of like a clip art off the web currently, like in modern times.
Yeah, people do it all the time.
Yeah, I could print out something of my own art onto like a screen for printing and recreate it a million times, which would be cool. But Andy Warhol did it all the time. And so Flowers, which is one of his most famous pieces, he stole from a photograph of a woman who I wish I wrote her name down because she deserves credit, but
They're literally identical. If you look at the
it's identical, except that it's it's like the imagery is identical. Like right here, this where I can truly see it is this blade of grass right here.
Yeah.
And this blade of grass, you don't necessarily see it in the flowers, but you definitely see it in like the blade of grass. He took this photograph, he put it on a screen print press, or not a screen print press. He just put it on a screen, and then he printed. This is not the only version of it. He printed a bunch of versions of this, and then he was sued for it. So, you know.
I hope they took a lot of his money.
So, which brings me to
yes.
How much I hate the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa is a terrible fucking painting. And the only reason why I say that is because I have no hate towards Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci was the coolest dude ever. He was so intelligent. He was a great painter. He painted The Last Supper. He painted
the Vitruvian Man.
Huh?
He did the Vitruvian Man.
Yeah, he was a great painter, right?
An inventor.
And yeah, he invented the blueprints. Yeah, total badass. But he invented the blueprints for a diving suit. He had blueprints for tanks. He had blueprints in an actual fucking model of a town hold on, let me backtrack. I got a little heated for a second. He has an actual model of a city, of what a city should look like to prevent mass spread disease. And he built that like.
Well, that would be helpful, Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah, where are you at now?
Yeah,
Which is, so he's just a pure genius, right?
Yeah.
In the Mona Lisa, I've seen it in person. It's in the Louvre. It's super small. I don't remember the exact dimensions of it, but it's probably, I don't know, like 14 by 12. That'd be my guess. It's pretty small.
So for people who are watching, it's about
yeah, it's like this big. For people that's listening, it's just small, okay? And it's not very colorful. It's really bland. The woman doesn't even have eyebrows.
She's not hot.
Yeah, totally not even worth looking at, bro.
Let's just say it. Let's just come out and say it, dude. The Mona Lisa is not hot.
Unpopular opinion.
Yeah.
But it's behind bulletproof glass in this massive room, and there's a crowd of people behind or in front of the Mona Lisa, all have their cell phones out, all trying to take a picture. in the Louvre, where there's thousands and thousands of other beautiful paintings that you could look at. Like the Mona Lisa is just like big old, not even worth it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And really, why the Mona Lisa is so famous
Yeah, why is it so famous?
it's because it's the only thing to have ever been stolen from the Louvre. The only thing ever. Every single thing that is in the Louvre has survived through World War II. Everything. The Mona Lisa is the only thing to have been taken or ruined from the Louvre.
How'd they get it back?
Pretty remarkable. I believe the guy who stole it just gave it back. I can't remember exactly.
That is the most ballsy, dopest shit you could do.
It eventually just found its way back to the Louvre, because when it was stolen, it was like, the only thing that ever been stolen from the Louvre.
They haven't made it. I'm sure they've made a movie about the mystery man who stole Da Vinci, stole the Mona Lisa, and gave it back.
The Mona Lisa is really the start of the show and the story, because as soon as this happened, I really think a lot of people want to talk about like what the Mona Lisa represents, right? Like I literally just had to write a small essay for this for my art class of what does the Mona Lisa represent? And to me, the Mona Lisa represents the act of stealing, because it wasn't until after it was stolen that all of these recreations of the Mona Lisa started happening.
Now they're stolen all the time.
And now the image of the Mona Lisa, yeah. And because of that, there is so much plagiarism. It's like the Mona Lisa basically was the ticket to every artist in the world to just copy from each other. Because as soon as the Mona Lisa was stolen, that's when pop art really got famous, where Andy Warhol just started doing whatever the hell he wanted. And like, if you think about it, on Instagram and in modern times, there's no true way to protect yourself. And we can look at these two artists and we can talk about something called outsider art. And outsider art is, I would consider myself an outsider artist, right?
Whoa.
Yeah. This reminds me of like some Nevada County hippie.
Yeah, like you walk into the dispensary, which is cool.
Yeah.
But again, art, go ahead.
It's all being an outsider artist is just, you're not well known, you're not critiqued, you basically make whatever you want, you don't have a specific style, you're not well protected.
Maybe support yourself on Patreon or something like that.
Yeah, you're self-taught. Well, even outside artists don't necessarily have a monetary value to any of their art. So a lot of outside artists just make art to make art. This is called Surrender to Survival by Justin Durr. It was made in 2018. This is all pen and paper, which is pretty cool. This one down here is called, so the top one, Surrender to Survival, for those who are listening, is, if you live in Nevada County, you have seen something like this in Elixart or or in the dispensary, or even just some
or on the back, or on some dude's ball cap.
I was gonna say on the back of like someone's van on their way to Burning Man or something like that. So just imagine that in your head. It's very psychedelic looking. And then the other one that we're looking at is called The Royal Flag, and it's by Hendrik Formoteau. It sounds like a French name, but wait, hold on. No, I'm looking at the wrong name. The guy who did Royal Flag, his name is Thornton Dial. Interesting. He's a more modern artist.
Yeah.
But this is like, it looks like the flag, but abstract. It looked like he just ripped the flag apart and made it into this like melty, textured, thick
Yeah, it definitely looks like
paint.
it's melting.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
cool.
so outsider artists is just, you're just doing your own thing, you're making your own art.
Yeah.
But what comes the here, I'll just put this yellow art piece on the back that's called Piss as our background, just to talk about
Let's talk about this.
just to talk about kind of what art is today.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to talk about specifically the difference between plagiarism and appropriation, which you would think is the same thing, but in the art world, apparently it's not. So all of the renditions of the Mona Lisa you would consider appropriation. Appropriation is just basically copying off of another artist to recreate it. Pablo Picasso has this famous quote of the best art, it goes something along the lines of the best artists out there steal, right? So, but plagiarism is when you just straight up rip someone off without any recognition or anything to them. But it's interesting because you could also say all of the renditions of the Mona Lisa is also plagiarism, because nobody asked Leonardo da Vinci for his permission. Right. And so it becomes this like really fine line of how do you protect yourself as an artist, and especially if you're just posting your stuff online. Like I post all of my art online, well, not all of it, but I post a lot of art online, and I don't watermark my stuff. Anyone could take one of my drawings and do whatever the hell they wanted with it. Please don't do that for anyone that's listening. You'll make my heart fall into a million pieces, because it's absolutely devastating when that happens. But like big corporate companies like Forever 21 and Urban Outfitters do that shit all the time. Right. And they what they say is that it was appropriation, that it's not plagiarism, that it's appropriation. And right. the most recent example that I can think of, I know there's something like this probably happened yesterday, but one that I can specifically remember is Miley Cyrus came out with a new album like a few years ago, and she stole art from the Sweet Feminist on, do you know who the Sweet Feminist is on Instagram?
I think I've heard the name.
She bakes cakes. Really, she just bakes cakes or desserts and just puts some like political ass shit on there.
Okay, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
So she made this one that said abortion is healthcare, and Miley Cyrus took the same exact cake and took a picture of her licking the cake and used it to promote her album. And then that same album that she was trying to promote, she stole art from this other Instagram artist that's really cool named Stephanie Sarli. Do you know who she is?
Mm-mm. I'll put a note.
She just
fingers fruit. Good creative people online.
She just fingers fruit, dude. That's literally all she does.
Okay, I know who you're talking about.
Just like sexual ass shit with fruit. And so Miley Cyrus took one of her videos and either recreated it or just straight up stole it from her to promote her new album. And like Miley Cyrus didn't give any recognition to these two artists.
At least say, hey, I got this idea from so and so.
Yeah, or even you have a ton of money. Why don't you hire those artists to do something for your album? They could have made something way cooler for you than just, I mean, if they wanted to, they could have made something even better than just what you stole from them. You know, they could have made something specifically for you that would have been better.
Absolutely. Well, there's this thing in music too, which kind of touches on this, and there's been all these lawsuits in the last, well, you know, pretty much for the last 60, 70 years. You know, someone will take another artist to court because they like, and it gets literally this specific, you know, it's like, okay, well, you know, you wrote, you know, the song that I wrote, the chord progression is G, D, A minor, D, G major, and you know, the Bee Gees or whoever the fuck wrote a song with those exact same chords, and the melody sounds like exactly the same except for this one note, And what's crazy with music too, and I'm sure I guess it'd probably be a little different with art, but I've written songs or I've written chord progressions and I go, oh, wait a second. That is this song. That is literally this melody. This is a Blur melody, or this is a Anderson Paak or something. It's like some crazy thing like that. And I like those artists. So I naturally it just kind of springs out of me. And then I go, oh shit, I need to change that because it sounds exactly like something someone else wrote.
Mhm.
Do you think that's like I guess with your art, do you have that issue too? Or is it a little different?
I actually think about this a lot because I do collages all the time, and I take collage images from like vintage Playboy magazines or National Geographic, like pretty well known magazines, because they have great imagery in it. And oftentimes what I do with my collages is either I'll just use the image and because I am so scared of something like this happening, of me accidentally stealing from someone, and me even just thinking about me doing that, I carry a lot of guilt.
Yeah, absolutely.
But even though I don't think I've ever actually done it before, but um I'll take like imagery from magazines and I'll re-alter it in some way. But like sometimes I think I'm like, is this kind of what Andy Warhol was doing when he saw an image in a magazine? Because that the woman who did that photograph, she presented it in a magazine. It wasn't like she put it in a museum or anything. It was in a magazine. So he
Yeah.
just straight up took it from a magazine. And so I think about that a lot. Or if with all the art that I see on Instagram, like I don't know if I subconsciously like recreate something that I saw. And um it's just interesting because I feel like art now compared to what it was a long time ago
Hmm.
is, I mean, the very basis of art is the same. It's just creating, because human beings have this urge to create, otherwise there wouldn't have been imagery in a cave from 30,000 BC,
Yeah, it's inherent and it's in our DNA. Even Neanderthals, I believe, um, who are different than Homo sapiens and human beings, but we were around at the same time. I believe even Neanderthals um, painted, or like had some rudimentary cave paintings. Even elephants will paint. I mean, you see certain animals paint. And definitely, it's like I see it as this need to, like, we are all going through this world. Like, I mean, human beings are kind of the exception because are self-aware to a very large degree and can think abstractly, but still it's like we are animals and we are going through this world relatively unsure about. I mean, we have some concepts about this world, but we're in a fucking floating ball in space, and we need a way to make sense of our reality, and we do that through art. And that
Mm-hmm.
is why it's so controversial too. um, and that's, I think, why I take issue with art that I think, like, not everyone has talent, not everyone can make art that is meaningful, and I believe that. I don't think that's bad. um, I guess I should say not everyone can make art that is meaningful on a large scale. Anyone can make art that is meaningful to them, and they should, because it's important.
Yeah.
But just like certain people can run businesses, some people have a way of communicating uh, the realities around us in this mystery in a way that other people can't. And I think the internet does devalue that to a certain degree. But I mean,
Which, and that devaluing makes it harder to be an artist.
yeah. But then it also, I mean, I follow amazing artists on Instagram that I didn't know existed, and every day I'm confronted with new people. So it's a
I
catch 22.
It is, it's a double-edged sword because you can create any platform that you want, which is one of the biggest parts of being an artist, is catering to a specific audience. Because the whole idea of art is, if you like to create a masterpiece, you it's really just igniting a feeling within someone, right? And you're not going to be able to do that to anyone that you want, right? You're going to have to do it to a specific audience. That's why there's different genres of music. That's why there's different genres of art. So you can create any type of audience that you want on Instagram or on Twitter or Tumblr or Patreon or whatever, and just go with it. Like, and make money from it too. Like, if Van Gogh had an Instagram, he'd be popping off, you know?
Or he'd be
He
a
would
or he'd be
probably,
a fucking weirdo.
or he'd be a fucking weirdo. Yeah, also that.
He'd be DMing
But
girls pictures of his severed ear.
um but I also think there's a huge difference in between talent and creativity. I feel like talent is something that you are like innately born with. You're like born talented. Like Pablo Picasso was born a prodigy. He knew what he was doing, you know. But anyone could be creative,
Yeah,
especially if you're exposed to it.
especially
Um,
children. Look at just, I mean, you're a teacher, you work with kids. Kids are naturally creative and
yes,
destructive.
and allowing creative situations in a classroom is really important too, because you can work on fine motor skills, and like you can expose young children to different cultures,
Hmm.
and you can have bigger conversations about things. Like, there's actually, I wrote this study down, there's actually a report by Americans for the Arts that states that students who participate in the arts on the regular are 4 times more likely to be recognized for academic achievement.
Hmm.
And it's because having art in your life just builds confidence and it builds
Yeah.
courage. And
It teaches you
if
how
you
to
have some,
create and think differently too.
yeah, if you have some sort of creative outlet, then you're gonna have more constructive thinking skills. And um because it offers a challenge, you know.
Absolutely.
You're given something that you can create, and the challenge is, what am I going to create? And there is really no limitations on that, what that creation could be. Which, I don't know about you, but when I'm told to write something and there's no prompt or anything, that's a bigger challenge than being told exactly what to write, you know.
Totally.
Because you're like, what do I write? Where do I start? Where do I go from here? How do
Right.
I end it? What's the middle?
It doesn't
um
feel, it's not a
but
natural process for you.
totally. And art kind of does that for you, in any kind of form of art too. So for visual art, performance art, music,
When I look at a
and there
blank
is
piece of
no.
paper and I have watercolors or something and I start to paint, I immediately am confronted with this understanding that I'm not a 3-year-old anymore or a 4-year-old, because if I was a little kid, I would just go for it and I wouldn't care. And as soon as I start going, I feel confident in other ways I express myself. And so to make something that I think I would look at in a museum and go, what the hell, makes me not want to do it, which is this strange, which is like, you need to do that. I mean, um, it's important to experiment creatively because it'll only make what you do and everything else better, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Or at least maybe not better, but at least give you a certain sense that, um, start with the process. And like with writing and with art, like I'm sure if you were to go and teach a beginning art class, you would start with this idea that art is something that everyone can do. And here are some techniques to avoid the frustration of being pulled out of it completely because of how your expectation. I would do the same thing when I was teaching music. It's like, okay, first of all, you're not going to be able to play a song in 2 weeks. That's going to be too hard for you if you've never picked up a guitar. Your hands are going to hurt. You're not going to be able to do it. So let's start at like the basic abstraction of what it is to play music and learn from the bottom up. And then you'll find out if it's something you have a natural interest for or not.
Mm-hmm.
But kids don't have that. Kids just go. Kids just don't. They don't have that self-conscious. I mean, they're creating and learning in the same way that you're teaching, I mean, essentially kids just absorb information, but with adults, it's a little different. It's like, there's that self-consciousness that's always coming up in term when they're creating things.
Yes.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, like that being said, I think it's super important to like start talking about art and being creative at a younger age, because it you learn about color, you learn about perspective, you learn about culture, you learn about balance.
Hmm.
You're more in tune with your world. And so this can build like a vocabulary, and this could build a sense of self and a sense of spatial awareness too, like because you're learning all these terms and then you're practicing them. And because especially if you start at like a preschool level where you're always having crafts and stuff, then you're building these fine motor skills while building this vocabulary too. And it's just, I don't know, I think it's really important. Art is just part of everyone's being, even if
Yes.
you're like, I don't know anything about art. It's part of life, because when you look at the McDonald's sign, someone had to create that.
Absolutely. And
Even a burger is a piece of art. I would say like culinary
oh,
skills
good
art,
food
you
is
know?
definitely an art. It's all about the subtleties, man. You can mess up, you can cook something really, you can cook a box of Kraft macaroni and cheese, add a little love, dude, and it is way better than if it was
Only
very,
Dino Craft and cheese,
yeah.
Kraft mac and
Um,
cheese.
well, one more thing I want to touch on before we call it is I've been really interested in like the psychology of personality and how that manifests, and basically as a way to understand kind of what's been happening politically and how people interface with social media, and it just, yeah, so I've been digging a lot into that. And something that the creative, so there's a dimension of the big five personality test called openness.
Okay.
And there's two different types of openness. There's openness general and openness to experience. And creative people usually have very, very high openness and openness to experience, and or not very low, but usually lower than average conscientiousness. And these are traits that are linked to these are traits that are linked to genetics in a lot of ways. And it's interesting to see that a lot of the stereotypes of artists being they're not interested in a regular 9 to 5 job. What they want to do is create. It was just fascinating. And openness to experience as a metric is essentially this idea that when you encounter something, if you're someone that's high in openness, you you're more open to ideas of others, you're more open to experiences, you're more open to um a lot of people get like, have you ever gone to a movie with someone that's kind of like a weird movie and people get uncomfortable, like like something about the movie will make someone so uncomfortable that they don't want to watch it anymore?
Yes.
I am a very on my test, I'm very high in openness, and I'd never really get like that. I'm always curious about what it is what the film is trying to say. um and it's just, that's, to me, that's a really interesting dimension, because also too, people low in openness can learn more about developing that trait by doing creative things. So it's almost like you want people who aren't used to doing creative things to spend more time doing creative things, because you're exercising your mind in a way that it doesn't that is almost antithetical to maybe how your genetics are, but it's still so important. And yeah, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that, because I just thought that was super interesting, and as sort of a way to um, understand why people just don't get art, because I think a lot of people don't get art, and it's super frustrating for artists sometimes.
Yes.
Maybe it's just the mother nature.
I think it all goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is like what exactly do people value in
Yeah.
art? And maybe that has more to do with personality than I think it does, because I mean, people who go there's a certain kind of people that go to art museums, you know,
Mm-hmm.
someone who is super into sports, and I don't know, I'm kind of generalizing here, but
Generalized, dude.
someone that's like really into sports and hasn't really been exposed to art in their life may not have any interest in it because of like their personality. They might have made those choices to not like art in the same sense that like a musician would or a theater kid would, you know.
Yeah.
And like you have to have certain characteristics, I guess, to be genuinely interested in certain things. Like I don't like sports, but I don't know if that's like the openness of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know, but I think you have to be open minded to enjoy art for sure, because art kind of depicts a lot about culture and about the times, and art can also be very political,
Yeah.
and but also at the same time art could not be
Versa.
political, and it could be very personal and invoke a really deep emotion. And if you're not ready for those emotions, then you're not going to be like, if a art piece invokes an emotion in you that you just aren't ready to deal with, then you're not going to like it. You're going to say something negative about it. Or if it's too weird for you, like there's this one artist, I can't think of her name right now, but almost all of her pieces are lard and chocolate themed, and she's like licked bust of her made out of chocolate and lard to like
Freak.
completely decompose them, and it's super weird. Like she bathed with it, and
Damn,
like
gross.
she had this whole message behind it. And if you're just like, if you're not
If you're like a
open
carpenter, like what the fuck?
if you're just not open to like empathizing with why she would want to do something like that,
Yeah. Or
then
the performance aspect of it too is also the art, I think. A lot of people don't get that.
yeah,
Right.
totally. And it's like you just have to be open
Yeah.
to any sort of visual art, because normally people who aren't open, like I would imagine people that ha- are not very open to things based off this personality test that you're talking about, um don't listen to very good music.
Or
They probably listen to Creed or something like that.
dude, or they're the type of people that just need music to be a background noise. My dad
Yeah,
and I talk about this a lot because he's a musician, and he talks a lot about people who um, just need music to have be background. They just turn on the radio, whatever's on the radio, they just listen to. They don't really think about it. It's just background noise. Like I can't do that. When there's a song on, it's usually what I'm focusing on, and
yeah,
it's very distracting if people are talking over. Yeah, yeah. It is interesting. I mean, there's tons we don't know about the mind and the way it interfaces with art and our artistic abilities.
we're still discovering things about our brain all the time. I feel like we know more about our own oceans, which we also know very little about, than we do our own brain.
Yeah,
I don't know.
we know more about Jeffrey Epstein killing himself than we do about our brain. And I don't know. What is your for people who want to check out your art? Where can people find it?
Oh man. Well, currently I'm trying to stay off the social medias as much as I can, but
Fair point. I
if
should
you
probably
would,
do the same.
yeah, I got too much going on right now, but soon I will be back in making art as much as I possibly can. And there's two places where you can check that out. Both are on Instagram, and you can find either account if you just look up one of these. So my main account, which is mostly stuff about my life, but some good art every once in a while, is at certain things but not others. And my art account, which is mostly just scanned, it's actually all just scanned images from my sketchbooks. It's called _bumps_. And that account is interesting because um, I am a multimedia artist. I do printmaking, I do ceramics, I do collage work, I do sculpture, I've made shadow boxes, I make earrings, I print clothes. It's just my whole being. I just can't stop. But that account, my bumps account, is just scanned images from my weather journals, and I am on currently book 12. So I have 12 books
Dude,
of just drawings of every
your
day.
weather journals blow me away. Your dedication to your weather journals blow me away.
They're kind of lacking right now because I really haven't had time to, but um like basically journals like 2 through 10 are all filled completely. So I have probably over 1,000, because every book has over 100 pages in them. So I have over 1,000 images of things I could post on that account. So
All right. Well,
so
I'll link both in the show notes, and yeah, hopefully
sweet.
expose more people to your art.
Well, if not, then whatever.
And fuck them. No, I'm just kidding. Well, thank you, Beth, for being my first guest, and yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yes, it was.